Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Leslie Juflis with Trading Live Online, and we're going to update the indexes today. We're going to start with the S&P 500. And I know that sometimes it is not as clear as other times as to a particular direction in the indexes, maybe an individual stock ETF, but I always like to use the indexes. First, I trade the S&P 500 frequently. That's the main market that I trade. I do trade some stocks and other things, but this is the main market that I trade. And even if you do trade individual stocks or ETFs, I think it's always a good idea to really get your finger on the pulse of the indexes. If you're trading stocks, technology stocks, then take a look at the NASDAQ index because it's very likely that the stocks that you are trading in the technology are very highly correlated to the NASDAQ, of course. So the correlations can make a difference. All right, so let's start with this daily chart of the S&P 500, and I'll show you my analysis on this, and maybe this might, help clear up some of the confusion out there to which way the market is going to go. First of all, I'm a firm believer, and you don't need to know which way price is going to go in order to make money. I think if you can, sometimes you have to have some patience. Let the market tell you that direction, and then you can go with that direction. On this particular chart, I think we're overlooking a pattern that occurred and completed a few months ago. So let's go back and revisit that and see how it fits into the analysis today. So it's an inverse head and shoulder pattern. So this has started actually forming back in June of 2022 with this low. So this would be the left shoulder. There was a rally to a high and then another low below this low to form the head of the pattern. Right in here, there's a smaller inverse head and shoulder pattern. That'd be the shoulder, the head, and the right shoulder. There'd be a neckline, and you can see that that moved to the upside. Well, after some jiggling around up and down, the right shoulder was formed. And this particular pattern is a complex pattern. It has multiple right shoulders, one here and one here. Now the neckline I've drawn from this high across here. You can see all the clustering around that neckline. Sometimes that's a clue that the market's getting ready to break through some resistance. It will tend to cluster around that area, and you can see that tight clustering happening right before the breakout, then a retest and the rally to the upside. So this pattern is still in play because it hasn't violated the pattern by coming down through the neckline, hasn't reached an objective yet. So what one of the possibilities is that this is just a pullback from where this uptrend started. Now this line here, this is a trend line. I've shown this a few times on some videos, one I did for stock charts last week. And the market really needs to break and hold above this trend line and of course get above this high and this high to continue that bullish move. But let's just take a look at where a potential price target might be on this inverse head and shoulder pattern. So I'm just taking the length of the pattern up to about this high. You can do it that way, or you can take the actual price of the high, actual price of the low, take the difference, and then add it to the breakout. Or you can do a measured move target such as this, and then you just take that and you move it over to where the breakout level is. So this looks like about the right place. Let me move this over a little bit. So that would bring the market to new highs and just above the 5,000, or just, excuse me, just below the 5,000 level. So this is a longer term pattern. So they don't always just go straight up to a target. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they take a little bit of a divergence and they kind of meander away. It looks to me like this low is a retest of this neckline breakout. That's another reason to consider that if this support is taken out, that the market were to turn back down and back below here, it would be invalidating this pattern, and my opinion would be very bearish for the market. All right, so now we have this mapped out. Do we know price is going to get here? No, we don't know that, but we can look at these other tools such as this trend line. And if we get a nice solid break above that and the market works its way up through this resistance, up through this resistance, then we have this resistance, all kinds of resistance. But if it's looking like it still has some strength to it to the upside, we can start to, use this as a target. But you do have to make sure you're watching how price is reacting to these resistance areas. But I think for right now, using this low as a support for the reasons that I just stated with this inverse head and shoulder pattern, I think is probably a really good low point to watch. Right now we have this point of this trend line to watch. So that gives us a range between here and there to be watching. But maybe price comes up and tests it. I like to look at the potential. What are the potential things that can happen with price? Well, one is it comes up and it tests this trend line if it's not ready to break through it yet. So it comes back down, does some jiggling around, and maybe we form a big range between here and there. But remember, this is what, it looks like before a breakout. This is not uncommon to see this type of price action. See how it got up to the trend line and then backed off, up to the trend line and backed off again. So we want to be watching if price gets up to this level. This is going to be just right around or below the 4,500 level. Okay, so there's one possibility, and that's using a little bit longer term price target on here, and also looking at a failure below here would be negative for the market, and that would be a sell signal to the downside. And we also might see a big range form. All right, let's take a look at a couple of other charts. So here's a little bit different view. So I like to flip through some time frames, and it always gives me a little bit different perspective on the price and how I'm looking at it. So here we have a retracement from the low 2022 up to this high. Hit that 382 retracement. This is a monthly chart. So we're in November. November has not closed yet, so we don't know what that bar is going to look like. Right now it looks like this, but we don't know if in a week or two if that's going to be staying there. So if you notice the lows here, so these are the October lows, and we just looked at the S&P 500 futures on the daily chart. Excuse me. So we know that here's the low right here. That's the low that we were just looking at on the S&P, and you can see these open and closes right next to each other. So those lows right here are important. The low just tagged where this breakout was. Look at all of the back and forth, sideways, opens, closes around that same level, then the breakout to the upside. So we can get another view of how important this low is. Now, if that's taken out, that would be bearish, and we're likely to see a deeper retracement from this leg, from the low to the high, and see a deeper retracement, probably down to a 618, maybe a 786. We'd have to just see how that looked. But here's where the resistance is on the monthly chart. So if, let's just assume, let's make an assumption, we'll check back at the end of the month that, this is a bullish engulfing pattern, and that it closes somewhere around here, and this candle still looks about the same as it does right now. Then we still have this resistance right up here where this line is drawn. for the market to be able to get through. But let me show you something on the retracement going this direction here. Let me put that on the high to low. All right. All right, now on the futures, see where this 886 retracement is here. So we have the 382, the 0.50, 618, 786, and the 886. Now the 886 retracement on the futures chart, the price actually got right about to it. And I'll show you on the NASDAQ in just a minute. But the 886 tends to be what I call the last chance fib retracement. And if it gets through and starts to have closes above that 886, we're likely to see these highs traded at. Oftentimes, maybe you get a little bit jiggling around there, but then oftentimes after that, the market does break through those highs. So we want to keep an eye on that 886 retracement, but I think if we get above here, that's going to be a strong move to the upside. And if we just draw a trend line across there, you'll see breaking that trend line is also going to be breaking right through about this resistance line as well, if it's a good confirmed breakout. So we want to watch for that. Now, one thing that I really want to watch is the RSI, which we can use as a momentum indicator. So this is the relative strength index. This is not relative strength, it's the index. So we want to see it move. If we get a break above here, you want to see it move above where this dashed line is right here. That would be bullish as well. So let's keep an eye on those things. And again, now we have our lows mapped out, and now we have where the market needs to get above in order to remain bullish and have a chance to get through these old highs and potentially onto new highs. So we'll take a quick look now at the NASDAQ. This is the NASDAQ futures on a weekly chart. So I just showed you the trend lines on the S&P on the daily, showed you a trend line on the monthly. The NASDAQ is above that trend line. And so we have one close on the weekly above that trend line. Coming below it, coming below these lows would be bearish for the NASDAQ, and certainly getting below these lows would be very bearish as well. So the NASDAQ is really leading, is the strongest between the Dow Jones Industrial, the S&P 500. The NASDAQ is the strongest of the three. But again, a relative strength index, we want to see that turn a bit more bullish. It really needs to, with more up with the NASDAQ, we want to see this start to turn more strongly to the upside. Notice how on these rallies back here, notice how it turned up, a little bit of a pullback, and just continued to rise with that rally. So we want to see something similar happen with this. Below this low on the RSI is probably going to be indicating negative, more downside to come. We see here that the NASDAQ had already traded up to that 886. They have found the resistance there and then, backed off, formed a ABCD buy pattern above here. So getting above and closing above that 886, we're likely going to see at least those highs challenged. And with enough strength, we'll see it move above there up towards that 127. Now that's going to be new all-time highs. So we want to really be monitoring things around that and not just assume we'd see resistance there. But oftentimes it'll be a good first target. So now we'll look at the Dow Jones Industrials. I'm going to use the futures chart of the YM, and this is on a weekly. So here's the trend line. So notice that the S&P is still below it, the NASDAQ is above it, and the Dow Jones is still below it as well. Now here's a bit of a longer term trend line for the Dow. It's got to get above this trend line. This is really the major one. This one, if it gets above here, then this is the next level that it's got to kind of contend with. So the support areas right here. Now this long candle, let me mention this. This is where I think the market will just really turn negative if it comes and takes out those lows. But in the meantime, if the market turns to the downside and gets a retracement, and this is true for the S&P and the NASDAQ, that those last long candles on the weekly chart, generally coming back into about halfway of those candles is usually going to be a stronger support area. So if it's not able to quite make it that time, turns around and comes down, let's watch that retracement level, see if we see some good buy patterns in there for the market to make another move back to the upside. So here you can see where I've got marked in. This is the important support. It's going to be bearish, I think, below there, and definitely below here would be bearish. And then these lows from 2022, those are very, very bearish if the market trades below those lows. And again, our relative strength has got to, on any move to the upside, we want to see this relative strength start getting above where this dashed line is. Now, the other thing is, here, if we look at the weekly chart, we don't have any bullish divergences yet on here. This is the MACD. So maybe we get some sort of a test down. It just flips below. Maybe it holds this one and then back up with a divergence. So there's another possibility. So my suggestions, I've given you several possibilities. I showed you the inverse head and shoulder on the S&P. I think that's an important pattern to keep monitoring right now. We looked at the NASDAQ. So we've looked at some possibilities of what price can do from here. Do we know what it's going to do? No, we don't have that power. But once it starts either like taking out the resistance or it takes out support, that gives us our signals which direction to be looking in. Well, I hope you found this helpful. Please feel free. I know it's a little bit longer today, but I wanted to get into all three indexes today. Feel free to leave a comment for me, and please like and share the video if you have other trader friends or groups that you'd like to see this. Well, have a great trading week, everybody, and I'll update as soon as I see something new on the charts.